Little Miss Mouse by Amy Ella Blanchard. Chapter 5. Billy and the Doll. Miss Hester did her best to comfort the grieving Ruth, and, if the truth were told, felt nearly as badly as the child herself at the destruction of the doll which had belonged to her twin sister. She took the broken doll in her hands and looked at it tenderly. "We had them exactly alike," she told Ruth. "Only mine was dressed in blue and Henrietta's in pink. We always dressed them so to tell them apart. My father brought them to us once when he had been to New York, and we thought there never were dolls like them." "What became of yours?" asked Ruth, interested. "Did you break it?" Miss Hester smiled a little wistfully. "No, I didn't break it. I gave it to someone who used to play with me when I was a little girl." "Did you give it away after your little sister died?" "Yes, many years after, when I was a woman grown." "And has the somebody you gave it to, has that somebody the doll now?" "I think so. Don't you think, Ruth, we would best take this poor broken Henrietta and put her back in the chest from which we took her?" "Yes," Ruth answered soberly. "I should like to know that she was laid away with Henrietta's things, the broken cup and saucer and the mittens with the thumbs worn out and all the rest of the things she used to have. And someday when I can afford it, I will get you a new doll. Lucia offered to give me any one of hers that I would choose if I ever wanted another one, but I don't feel now that I ever shall." Ruth drew a long sigh. "I loved Henrietta so." Her chin quivered, and then the tears flowed again as they did at intervals all the evening, and at bedtime, when there was no Henrietta, sitting in her little wooden chair smiling into the dimness, came the most piteous weeping of all, till Ruth's pillow was wet with tears, and when Miss Hester peeped in at midnight, so many buttonholes had there been that day, she found the child wide awake, the drops still burdening her long lashes. "Poor baby," she said, bending over to give her one of her gentle kisses. "Would you like to come in and sleep with me?" "It wouldn't seem so lonely," said Ruth, sitting up, "but you don't like anyone to sleep with you, Aunt Hester." "I'd like it tonight." So Ruth found her comfort in the clasp of Miss Hester's arm and went to sleep cuddled close. Billy had listened with kindling eyes and with angry exclamations to Ruth's account of the disaster, and the next day, on their way to the store, he confided to Ruth that he meant to do up that Nora Petty. Just what the process of doing up might mean, Ruth didn't know, but she believed in Billy's prowess, and was sure it was something too dreadful for any girl to endure. If it had been a boy, now, who had done this thing, she would willingly have allowed Billy to punish him as he might see fit, but a girl battered and banged by Billy's tough little fists was something altogether too awful to be thought of, so she tried to make him promise that he would let Nora alone, saying, rather grandly, that boys ought not to fight girls. "Ah, look-a-here, I didn't mean to knock her down and pommel her," said Billy. "But I'll tell all the fellows how mean she is, and if Frank Crane gives her any more apples, I'm mistaken. They won't. Any of the other fellows. You can bet your boots. I guess we can find a way to give her a dose without our fists." "Well, it won't do any good now," returned Ruth, resignedly. "Billy, I wonder who has that other doll that was Aunt Hester's." "You can search me," replied Billy. "Just think of it. She's the only one in the world like my Henrietta, and I do wish I could have her. Do you suppose the person loves her very much as I would? Ask me something easy. Maybe there are some others somewhere like that one." Billy was thoughtful. "Where? You know Aunt Hester said they didn't make that kind nowadays." "Oh, I don't know just where. There might be some left over. I never saw one. That's not saying there ain't any. Some old person might know where one could be had." "Oh, do you really think so?" "Might. Can't say for sure, but somebody might happen to know. But Aunt Hester didn't know. Do you mean someone as old as she is? Yes, or older. How old do you suppose she is? About 44, I guess. You know, on the headstone over the twin sisters' grave it says, born February 10th, 1860, died March 21st, 1868. Now, you know they were twins, and if she was born in 1860, that's 44 years ago. Oh, how smart you are about figures, Billy. I never could have thought of that. 44 is quite old, of course. The two trudged along without saying anything for some minutes. Each one was busily thinking. Billy had a scheme he was pondering over, and Ruth was supposing. She did a great deal of supposing. What-ifing, she and Lucia called it. What if someone knew where a doll like Henrietta could be bought, and what if someday as she was going to the store she should look down and find a silver dollar? A doll couldn't cost more than $1. She stopped short and looked at the ground searchingly. It might be there at that very moment, and this might be the day when she would find it. "What you looking for?" asked Billy. "Oh, nothing. I was just thinking, what if I should find a silver dollar in the road?" "Pshaw!" exclaimed Billy. "That's foolishness. But people do find money sometimes." "They don't so often when they're looking for it. I've often looked and I never found but a nickel in my life." "No, sir. The only way you're sure of getting money is to work for it." "I can't do that very well, and besides, it would be much nicer to find it." Billy did not answer. He seemed preoccupied. "There ain't much to carry home," he said. "I'll take it as far as the gate, and then you can take it in. I want to see somebody before dark." "One of the boys?" asked Ruth. But there was no reply, for by that time the store was reached. This place was about 1/4 of a mile from Miss Hester's small house, which stood on the edge of the town, upon a street which became a road just beyond. The town was not a large one. The houses stood far apart, and many of them were surrounded by pretty gardens. In the center of the town, just opposite the store and the post office, stood Dr. Peasley's house, a square brick building with a porch before the front door. The doctor was not married, and his mother, an invalid, was so rarely seen that most persons had forgotten her existence and thought that a housekeeper held sway. After leaving Ruth at the gate of their home, Billy retraced his steps, and, crossing the street when he came to the store, he went directly to Dr. Peasley's door. The good doctor's mud-spattered buggy stood before the gate, so Billy knew that he should find the doctor at home, and he was not mistaken, for he was in his office. "Well, Billy boy," he exclaimed, looking up over his glasses, "what brings you here? Anyone ill up your way? Not Miss Hester, I hope?" There was a little anxious ring in his tone. "Nobody's sick," returned Billy. "I came over to consult you." "About yourself? What's your particular indisposition, Mr. Beatty?" The doctor and Billy had been good friends ever since that day when Billy had been picked up in the streets of the city and had wakened to consciousness to see the doctor's kind face bending over him. "'Tain't nothin' the matter with me," returned Billy, grinning. "I'm all right." "Don't want to be fashionable and part with your appendix?" asked the doctor, fingering some sharp instruments which lay on the table before him. Billy gave a little squirm, but faced the doctor's glance sturdily. "I ain't achin' to be no subject at a orspital," he returned. "I reckon the doctors can learn their trade without foolin' with my inards." The doctor laughed. "Well then, proceed to business. What's troubling you, Governor?" Billy looked down at the stubby toes of his shoes. He was thinking just how he would best conduct his system of inquiries. Presently, he looked up and said, "You've known Aunt Hester a long time, haven't you, Doctor? Ever since we were smaller kids than you and Ruth?" Billy nodded. "Did you ever see them dolls her and her sister used to have? Waxy ones, dressed in pink and blue?" The doctor looked at him sharply and answered in a more reserved manner, "Yes, I remember them. Well, have you any idea who Miss Hester gave hers to? She said she didn't give it away till she was grown up, and I thought maybe you might know. The doctor drummed thoughtfully upon the arm of the desk chair, which he had swung partly around toward Billy. Why do you want to know? He asked presently. And why do you ask me? Well, I knew you were an old friend. You've got the Major's cane, you know, and I didn't know, but you could tell something about the doll. This is why I want to know. And he launched forth into a tale of Ruth's trouble. The doctor did not interrupt him, but at the close of the story, he muttered under his breath, "Humph, that's just like a Petty." He looked Billy over with a smile. "See here, youngster," he said. "You were a wise little owl to come to me with that tale, for the fact is that I do know to whom Miss Hester gave that doll, and I also happen to know that it is still in existence. Do you think the person that has it would sell it? I'd work all day Saturdays, all the time I mean from my regular chores, to pay for it. You haven't got any odd jobs to be done, have you, Doctor? I'm real strong. Feel my muscle." He spoke eagerly and stretched out an arm, which in truth showed more muscle than flesh. The doctor gravely responded to the invitation and nodded assent. "You'll do," he said. "Well, sir, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll try to arrange the matter for you. I'll see about bargaining for the doll. I can probably make a better deal than you, and I'll have some jobs ready for you, if not here, somewhere. Now mind, I'm not sure that we can make the trade, but I'll see how the land lies, and if the doll can be given up without any hurt feelings or anything of that kind, we'll get it." Billy's face beamed. "Thank you, sir," he said, getting up from his chair. "I just felt sure you could help a fellow out. Say," he paused after picking up his hat, "I heard the other day that it was one of them Petties that's keepin' Miss Hester out of her house." "See here, youngster," returned the doctor, rising, "you see and hear too much. Such an old head as yours must have broader shoulders to carry it before you tackle such matters as that." Billy stood still. "I guess maybe I have got an old head," he replied soberly. "I don't guess I ever was a baby. I don't remember any time when I didn't have to look after myself, and it's come kind of natural, so now it seems as if I ought to be looking after her when she's so good to me." The doctor softly pinched the boy's ear. "That's all right, Governor, but I reckon she has one or two friends that are not so old yet, but that they can give an eye to Hester Brackenberry's affairs. You think about your lessons and your little chores and things, so that when the time comes for we old fellows to step out, you can step in. Oh, yes, when shall you come again? Let me see, this is Saturday. Come in Tuesday and I'll tell you if we're on the track of the doll." Billy departed in high spirits. The doctor, looking after him, said to himself, "Smart little rascal, keen as a razor, and, if I'm not mistaken, he's going to turn out to be Hester's right-hand man. She'll make a good boy out of him if anyone can." And the doctor turned back to his desk. Billy trotted home well satisfied with his call. He would not tell Ruth yet, but he chuckled as he thought of what a joyful surprise it would be to her if such a thing were to happen as that he could produce the doll in a blue frock. It must be confessed that there was a measure of feeling against Nora Petty which prompted him in being most energetic in trying to find the doll. He had heard whispers of Miss Hester's transactions with the Pettys. It had been told him that old Mr. Petty had been the one to press his claim against Major Brackenberry's estate, and that there were suspicions of there having been some sharp practice. It was known that the Major, in his last years, was very forgetful, and, moreover, being an honest man himself, was too ready to trust others, so that he had not been as careful as he should have been in business matters. The result of this was that after his death there were outlying debts which Miss Hester believed to have been paid, but for which no receipts could be found. Among these debts was a sum of money claimed by old Simon Petty. Miss Hester was sure her father had paid it, for it was a large amount, and she remembered hearing the Major say one day that he would be clear of that debt before 24 hours were over. Yet, when they came to look for the receipt, it could not be found. Neither was any amount of money corresponding to that due to be discovered remaining to the Major's credit in bank or elsewhere. Everyone felt that there was a fraud somewhere, but it could not be ferreted out, and, therefore, the old home passed into Simon Petty's hands, and Miss Hester went to live in the little brown house. It was the Sunday after Billy's call upon the doctor that this gentleman overtook Miss Hester and the children on their way home from church. The doctor was in his buggy. He checked his horse and called, "Jump in here, Hetty, and I'll take you home." Miss Hester hesitated, but the doctor insisted, saying, "I've something very important to talk to you about, and I don't know when I'll get another chance." So Miss Hester left the children to go home together while she and the doctor drove off. They must have taken a long way around, however, for the children had reached the house and were setting the table for dinner when the buggy stopped at the door. There was a little wistful smile on Miss Hester's face all during dinner, and she was evidently thinking of something besides the food up on her plate. The children thought it must be the sermon of which she thought, and would have been rather surprised if they could have known that her old doll occupied her mind, and that the doll at that moment lay in a drawer in the doctor's desk. It had been there many a year, and the doctor valued it highly, for had it not taken part in the adventures of little Hester Brackenbury and Tommy Peasley years before? Had it not often been taken a nutting in the woods with the two, and once rescued from a watery grave by Tommy, who could not stand Hester's tears, and who got himself wet to the skin in his valiant effort to save the sinking doll? At another time, had it not proved a benefactor when they had lost their way, and a stream of sawdust from the doll's body served as a clue to lead them back to the right path? Hester's mother had restored the sawdust, and had mended the leak so that this particular thinning out did not happen again. These and many more incidents came to Miss Hester's mind as she ate her dinner. The last time she had seen her childhood's treasure was when Tommy went to college and had begged the doll as a mascot. "It will help to keep me straight, Hetty," he said, and she had given it to him, laughing at his whim. On his visits home, he had told her of the doll's honored place in his room, of the jokes of his fellow students concerning it, of how he had nearly fought someone because of it, and of how the scoffer had been made to offer an humble apology to Miss Doll as satisfaction. She had never asked it back again. So many things had happened since. Trouble had come to them both, and these two had never married because of them. So, on this Sunday morning, Dr. Tom Peasley told Miss Hester of Billy's quest for her old doll, and asked her if it would please her were he to give the doll to Billy for Ruth. "It was dear of Billy to think of getting it," said Miss Hester. "Yes, Tom, if you can spare your mascot, it will give great happiness to little Ruth. I must confess that I still want it, old idiot that I am," he answered. "But, Hester, the good luck I hoped it would bring seems never to be mine, and so—" "But you are greatly blessed, Tom," Miss Hester interrupted quickly. "You have a good practice and are so well beloved. Yes, you are greatly blessed." "In all things, but in a wife, Hester," said the doctor, sighing. "Your mother is just the same?" "Just the same, exacting, querulous, domineering, yet clinging to me and dependent upon me for all that makes life at all worthwhile to her. She is my mother, and we love each other. She needs you, Tom, just as my father needed me, and we have neither of us failed in our life work. My two children are a great comfort to me. They are uncommonly nice little youngsters, considering how you happened to find them. I shall keep an eye on that boy," said the doctor. "He has a future before him, or I'm mistaken. I think it will be as well, perhaps, if I let him earn the doll." Miss Hester agreed. "I want him to learn to be self-respecting. He has good instincts, is shrewd and ambitious. He continually astonishes me by exhibiting some new and very hopeful trait." I liked the way, at the first, that he was willing to go to school and be placed in the class with boys so much smaller, for he knew very little. He had learned to read and is quick as lightning at figures, so he is fast pushing his way up into the higher classes. "He's all right," commented the doctor. "I hope you will have as great satisfaction from that little mouse of a girl." Ruth, once her love is won, is the dearest child in the world, Miss Hester hastened to say. "I think she will be like a real daughter to me. Oh yes, Tom, I shall be very happy to see her joy over the doll, and it is good of you to be willing to give it up, though we are too old now to be sentimental over such things." The doctor sighed. "I have other treasures and memories, Hester, and most precious of all are the memories. I wish I could save you that everlasting needlework. I remember you always did hate buttonholes." "They are a good discipline," returned Miss Hester, smiling. "I probably need them for my development. Won't you come in?" The doctor declined. "God bless her," he murmured as he drove away. Chapter 6. Miss Hester meets an old acquaintance. On Tuesday, Billy hied him forth again to the doctor. When he returned, he had a package carefully tucked under his arm. It was a mild day, and Ruth was sitting on the steps with Stray in her lap. She had pinned a small shawl around him, and was now holding him like a baby, in which position he seemed most comfortable. Ruth looked up as Billy came in. "I am pretending that Stray is my child. He is the only doll I have now to play with," she said. Billy laughed a little gleeful laugh as he stopped to look at the patient Stray, whose brown paws hung helplessly outside the shawl. "He ain't got quite such a pretty complexion as your other doll," said Billy. "He's as dark as a dago. Maybe he is one." "Oh, no, he's not," returned Ruth, looking down, a little out of conceit with her baby. "I'd rather play a dog was a dog," said Billy. "Oh, no, you wouldn't. Not if you were a girl and hadn't any doll. What would you do then?" "I'd get one, with a blue dress on," answered Billy, going into the house laughing. Ruth felt that this was an unnecessarily cruel taunt, and did not follow him. Great would have been her surprise if she had seen him enter Miss Hester's presence, joyfully holding out his package and crying, I've got it, and I'm going to work Saturdays, an hour every Saturday for a month to pay for it. Ain't that fine? I tell you, Dr. Peasley is a brick." Miss Hester held out eager hands. "Let me see, Billy," she said. He handed her the package, which she carefully unwrapped and disclosed, to view a doll about 10 inches long, dressed in a faded blue frock. What memories it brought back to the gentle woman, whose eyes filled with tears, as she sat holding the doll in her hand. She said never a word, at which Billy wondered, but at last she drew a long sigh. "It makes me remember so many things, Billy dear," she said. "I forgot where I was for the moment, for I went back to those old days when my father brought Henrietta and me our dolls. Then later on there were so many things. Never mind. It is all over now. Where is Ruth, Billy? Are you going to give her the doll right away?" "Yes. Don't you think I'd better? I certainly want to see her when she gets it. She's sitting out on the steps nursing Stray. She hadn't an idea what I had under my arm. I'll tell you what let's do. Let's wait till supper time and then set the doll in her chair. I'll put a pile of books in it, and then won't she stare to see Miss Doll sitting in her place?" Miss Hester smiled assent, and the two plodded together while Ruth sat outside on the steps watching the sun go down. A golden afterglow was lighting up the sky when Billy came out to her. "Supper's ready, Ruth," he said, rubbing his hands together in a pleased manner. "Come on, hurry up. We're going to have something good." "Are we, really?" Ruth forgot that she was slightly miffed at Billy's former remark. Billy nodded, and Ruth, unpinning the shawl from Stray, set him down on the ground where he stretched himself, wagged his tail, and started off to find some exciting thing to do after his hour of rest in Ruth's arms. The kitchen in which they ate their meals, except on high days and holidays, was a comfortable place. A neat rag carpet covered the floor. There were white curtains at the windows, and, now that Miss Hester had lighted the lamp, there was a cheerful brightness in the room. Old Mrs. Perkins sent me a nice pot of apple butter this morning, and some fresh sausage, said Miss Hester as Ruth came in. We are going to have some of the apple butter tonight and some of the sausage in the morning. I don't know anyone who makes better apple butter and sausage than she does. She used to send it to my father, who always praised it highly, and now she seems to be keeping up the custom by sending it to me. Come, Ruth. Doesn't it look good? Said Billy, viewing the dish with hungry eyes. And it will taste as good as it looks. So spicy and sweet. Hello, who's that sitting in your chair, Ruth? Ruth, who had been sniffing the apple butter from the other side of the table, went quickly to her place and gave a little scream of surprise and delight. Oh, Billy. Oh, Aunt Hester. Where did it come from? It is my dear Henrietta's twin sister, I am sure. Oh, how did you get her? Ask Billy, said Miss Hester. Ruth turned a questioning face toward Billy. You'll never guess, he said. Dr. Peasley got it for me. For you? Did you tell him? Oh, you dear Billy. Go on, tell me all about it. I got it for ye, said Billy, and I am going to pay for it by working an hour on 4 Saturdays for the doctor. I am to rake leaves for him and do some clearing out in his garden. He spoke in an offhand manner. Isn't she the very live-in image of the other one? Ruth examined the doll critically. Yes, as near as could be. She has just a little different expression, but she is just as lovely. Oh, you dear Billy, how good you are to do this for me. I am so happy. I could never in the world do anything half so nice for you. If only you didn't hate to be kissed, I'd come right over there and kiss you. I'll hug you anyhow. Oh, now, began Billy. That's just like a girl. Though anyone could see that he was not ill-pleased when Ruth rushed to him and gave him as mighty a hug as she was capable of. The apple butter was a thing of small consideration by the side of this wonderful thing that had happened, and Ruth had so many questions to ask about the how and why of it all that she ate very little supper, and her eyes constantly traveled to the doll which she had sitting beside her in another chair, and she chattered so constantly about it that her appreciation was good to see. Weren't you surprised and glad to see her again, Aunt Hester? She asked. I should think you would love to have her back again living in the same house with you. Do you suppose the person you gave her to was very sorry to give her up? Rather sorry, I think, returned Miss Hester, with a faint little flush coming to her cheeks. Maybe she needed the money more than the doll, Ruth consoled herself by saying. Of course, as long as she must be a grown person now, she would be likely to want a new bonnet or frock, and that's why she was willing to sell the doll. I've a notion it was the doctor himself, said Billy, his mouth full of bread and apple butter. Why, Billy Beatty, what in the world would he want with a doll? Exclaimed Ruth, surprised at such a suggestion. Did he have it, Aunt Hester? Why, my dear, Aunt Hester began, when she was interrupted by a knock on the door, and Billy rushed tumultuously to answer, being very anxious to get back to the bread and apple butter. It was Dr. Peasley himself who entered. Hello! He cried cheerily. I was driving by and I thought I would drop in and see if this young man got home safely with his purchase. What's this? Apple butter? I declare that takes me back to the old days, Hester, when we used to come back hungry from our romps in the woods and would make raids on the crock of apple butter in the pantry. Do you remember how old Polly used to scold us because we always preferred that which Mrs. Perkins had sent and which Polly always reserved especially for the Major? And this is some of that very Mrs. Perkins's make, Miss Hester told him. Sit down, Tom, and have some. Glad as the children were to see him and honored as they felt by his presence at their supper table, They were struck with consternation at the amount of apple butter he consumed, and considered that, at that rate, the crock would last but a short time. The doctor, catching sight of Billy's eyes fixed anxiously upon him, as he helped himself to a fourth slice of bread which he lavishly spread with apple butter, threw back his head and laughed. "You think I've a pretty good appetite, don't you, Governor?" he said. "This is positively my last slice. I have had a long ride way out in the country to see a sick woman, and this is my first bite since breakfast." He was as good as his word, and when he had finished, he turned to Ruth and said, "You haven't told me how you like this young lady." He picked up the doll and looked at it with such interest that Ruth said, "Was it really yours, Doctor?" "Billy says he believes it was." The doctor laughed. "Billy is too smart. Don't you think it would be rather funny for an old bachelor to be playing with dolls? Ask me no questions, and I'll tell you no lies. The truth is, Miss Mouse, the person to whom it belonged would rather keep the ownership a secret." Ruth looked a little disappointed. She would like to have had a history of the doll's career since it left Miss Hester's hands. She was too polite, however, to press the question, and only said, "I am sure it was very nice of whoever it was to give it up to me, and I am very much obliged to you for getting it for Billy and me. I thought maybe she belonged to a lady who needed a new winter hat, and that was why she was willing to sell the doll." "I need a new winter hat, don't you think so?" said the doctor, drawing attention to his old felt hat, the worse for wear, and trying to turn the subject. "Yes, but you can buy one whenever you want. All you have to do is to go to the bank, and they will give you the money." The doctor laughed. "That's your idea of it, is it?" "Why, of course, all gentlemen have money in the bank," she answered confidently. The doctor laughed again. "Then, I suppose, if I want to keep up my reputation for being a gentleman, I'd better not contradict you," he said. "What would you name the doll?" asked Ruth, changing the subject to one with which she was more familiar. "How do you like Little Mascot?" Ruth considered this very seriously. "I don't think I quite like that," she decided. Then, lest she might be hurting his feelings, she hastened to say, "I think what you call Aunt Hester sometimes is a pretty name." "What do I call her?" "Hetty. I'd like to call her that, I think." "Then suppose you do. I'm sure that will satisfy us all." And so Hetty was the name decided upon. "It seems to me she needs a new frock," suggested the doctor. "A blue one," Ruth agreed. "Yes, that should be the color. Some day I'll take you downtown and we'll buy the stuff for one, then Miss Hester can help you make it." Ruth looked at Miss Hester wistfully. "But she has to sew so much," she said. "Though now I can wear Henrietta's clothes, there is not so much to do for me, and Billy's overcoat is all done, and it looks fine." Miss Hester colored up a little and said, "Never mind about that, Ruth." The doctor grumbled something about its being a crying shame to cheat a woman, and after that, he and Aunt Hester went into the living room while Ruth and Billy washed the dishes, Hetty sitting well propped up on a chair watching them. Once in a while, the children caught the words Old Petty and Squire Field, and knew that the two in the other room must be talking either about the lost receipt or the government claim. "When we get back to the old house," said Ruth, as she washed the last plate, "we can have apple butter every night for supper, and the doctor can come and have all he wants, but I wish he had had his dinner today." She added, "So do I," said Billy, with feeling. "Oh, you dear beautiful love," Ruth turned to Hetty. "You are going to have a lovely new frock someday. Oh, Billy, don't you just love Dr. Peasley?" "He's fine," responded Billy. "Maybe I'll be a doctor, Ruth, if I don't keep a store." "Oh, I'd rather you'd keep the store," decided Ruth, "for then you won't ever have to go without your dinner." The doctor stayed for an hour or more, and then it was bedtime for Ruth, She would fain have taken Hetty to bed with her, but at the dreadful suggestion from Billy that she might roll over on her in the night, she concluded that Hetty would be safer elsewhere. So a bed was made for her on a chair by Ruth's bedside, so that she could be near at hand. "I thought of taking her up to see poor Henrietta," Ruth told Miss Hester, "but then I thought she might feel too badly to see how dreadful she looks after all these years, and so I am not going to let her know where she is. Please, Aunt Hester, I want to say, 'God bless Billy' over again. I didn't say it slowly enough, and maybe he'll think I didn't mean it." So she added to her prayer, "Please, God, bless Billy a great deal more than you did before, and make him grow up to be like Dr. Peasley. Only let him keep a store, please." She was not usually so expansive, and Miss Hester realized that her heart was very full, and that into it she had taken for all time not only herself, but Billy Beatty and Dr. Peasley.